Hi, this is Stephanie Vaughn, and welcome to Ageless. Our guest is in the studio and ready to share their story. So come on, let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome. It's Stephanie, and I have Virginia. She is a wonderful lady, and I am so grateful for the internet because I've never met Virginia in person, but we have through the internet, through a Bible study. And Virginia was so gracious in her willingness to come and share her life with us. So Virginia, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Tell me some favorite things you like to do.
Well, I like to hike. I like to play tennis. I'm an outdoor girl. I played tennis in college on scholarship and in high school. So I still keep that up. I love to get together with women. I play tennis with a group of women every week and enjoy that. I love to keep my grandchildren. I do that one day a week for my daughter-in-law. I love to read. I love to attend Bible studies. And that's really, I guess that's most of my loves. I love my husband.
That's a good
and my family.
So with tennis, you said you went to school on a scholarship?
I did, yes.
Oh, okay. Where did you rank?
Oh, I was number 5. So I was low on the totem pole, but and on the team. But I did get to play. I started and I played in high school. And it was during a time before Title IX. Mm-hmm. So the women, originally when I went, they wanted me to be on the team. I was on the team. But then Title IX passed. So I got a scholarship before I even finished my freshman year. It was a very small school. So the tennis team wasn't, I didn't have to be great to play tennis, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
It was early in women's sports, and I don't think you had to be an overachiever at that point to be able to play in college.
Oh, nice. When you played in high school, I'm guessing that you had some training all the way up through high school, or you just kind of started the process?
I started playing, my dad played tennis, so he took the girls out to play. So, and my brother, but there were 5 girls in our family and 1 boy. So my dad loved tennis, and he sort of introduced us all to it. Some of us, it stuck with us, and others it didn't. But
I love the fact that you just mentioned your sisters. So we'll talk about them in a minute.
Okay.
But I would like for you to share your story as far as your growing up years, what that was like, and then move into this relationships that you had with your sisters.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the town I live in now, Greer, South Carolina. I said I was one of 6 kids. I had a wonderful childhood raised by 2 people who loved each other, loved their kids, and loved the Lord. Mm-hmm. And they lived God every day. It was early morning devotionals as a family were normal. We did it every morning. And it was really an idyllic childhood. Lots of playing outside. And I had lots of playmates because I had all those brothers and sisters. And my mother or our caregivers, my mother worked, and I'll get into that in a minute, but they wanted us outside. They didn't want 6 kids underfoot. So we played outside a lot. And I was the number 4 child. I was in the middle of the pack. And I never lacked for a playmate because of that. It was wonderful growing up. My parents were both amazing people. But since this is a podcast about women, let me tell you about my grandmother and my mom.
Yes.
My grandmother went to University of Texas in the early 1900s. And when she graduated, she wanted to be a missionary. She felt called. So as a single woman, she arranged a voyage to China, and she left for China on a boat in the early 1900s by herself.
Wait, you said left on a boat?
On a boat, yes. She went on. That's how she went to China, and which to me is just amazing in itself. A single woman, in the early 1900s, doing that. That's just so brave.
Wow.
But while she was on the boat, she had a strep throat, and there was one doctor on board, and he was going to be a medical missionary to China. So he treated her, and before the voyage is over, they married.
Wow. Now, I got to go back. How long was that trip from here?
I think it was 3 months. I think it took 3 months. So they were on the boat a long time. And, things were a little simpler then. And I think they just decided we're meant for each other and we'll get married. And so they did.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess she's just was so incredibly brave. She's one of my heroes. And my mom is another hero because my mom was raised in Suzhou, China. And she just had such a unique and progressive worldview because she wasn't born here. And it didn't fit with the conservative South when she moved back here to go to college. So she was always a bit of an outsider, but that was okay with her because she was just a deeply spiritual woman. She went to medical school and she was a physician and anesthesiologist in a time and moved to Greer in 1954 in a time when women did not, a lot of women didn't work. And she was a very quiet reformer for women. Mm-hmm. She was very humble. Oftentimes people, once she retired, people that she did volunteer work with had no idea that she had the background she had because she just never talked about herself. She talked about other people in good ways. And she was an encourager. She was the most godly woman I've ever known. I never heard her say an unkind word about or to anyone. Mm-hmm. I wish I could be more like her, but she spent a lot of time in prayer and Bible study, and she lived a sanctified life. I just felt like the longer she lived, the more she became like Jesus. Mm-hmm. That's my goal, but I fall short every day. But she just lived like Jesus. Mm-hmm. She did not fit in the South because she grew up with different races. And so she had a whole different view of, like I said, she was a quiet reformer, but in a lot of ways she was a loud reformer in the South. She spoke up on the things that she felt like were wrong. Mm-hmm. And I admired that. She taught us a good work ethic, and we laughed and said she would never let us sleep late. 6 children, she would come in on Saturday mornings, and the day's wasting. Everybody get up.
Oh, you couldn't sleep in?
You could not sleep in her house. And you better have your bed made because she was going to give you something to do. She worked when I was growing up. So the girls learned to cook early because my mom said, I'm working and you girls are going to learn how to run a house. So that was good for us. She had 2 mottos that stuck with me. One was 1 Corinthians 10:31. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do everything for the glory of God. And she lived her life that way. But she also felt like any task you take on, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Mm-hmm. She had many life verses, but the other one was Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatever your hands find to do it with all your might. So she taught us there wasn't anything we couldn't accomplish. She was such a positive influence. But she also taught us that it was to God's glory, not for our own. I felt like she broke barriers for other women in medicine, particularly because she was so well liked, at the hospital, and such an encourager. If it hadn't been World War II, my mother wouldn't have gotten in medical school because they wouldn't have let women in. Mm-hmm. But because it was during World War II and the men were fighting, my mom got to go. She was smart enough to go, but some man would have taken her place. Yeah. So, and she got to meet my dad there. So that was nice too. She just always felt like women weren't given opportunities, and they weren't. In 1954, when she moved to Greer and practiced medicine, there were no other women doctors, probably for miles, except in her family. She had an aunt that was a doctor, and so it was, her father was a doctor. So it was, her family taught her that there's nothing women couldn't do. Mm-hmm. So she's really my biggest influence in my life, and certainly my biggest godly influence in my life. I accepted Christ when I was 9, but it was really a slow realization, not some people, when they're adults and they walk down the aisle, or that's what Baptists saying, but they accept Christ as their Lord and Savior. It's a little different than when you're raised in the faith. Mm-hmm. And because of family immersion in Bible teachings, it was more a natural progression for me. But I have some life verses. I have John 10:10. I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And Jeremiah 29:11. This is one I say every day. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. And that's my favorite Bible verse to send to women who are dealing with difficulties. Friends of mine and women that seek me out. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite Bible verse because I say, God has got this. Just give it to him and he's got plans for you. Mm-hmm. I met my husband when I was in college and he felt called to youth ministry. So he went to seminary. I was a few years younger than him. And once I graduated, we married and I joined him and worked while he went to school.
Okay.
And God always provided. I'm so thankful for the jobs I had because my husband was a youth minister for 20 years and he went to seminary before that. God's provision was abundant and amazing for us.
Mm-hmm.
We've been married 43 years.
Oh, wonderful.
And he was in youth ministry for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was an accountant. That was my career.
Oh.
And I was very involved in church life too. So I had two jobs, one is the accountant and church life. I taught girls Sunday school classes for teenage girls and helped with mission organizations and youth retreats. And our lives were very full and busy. About 4 years into our marriage, God blessed us with a wonderful son who has been amazing, amazing gift to us. He's our only child. I had suffered many miscarriages and infertility, and later found out it was because I had an autoimmune disease. But at the time, they didn't have the tools to diagnose that.
Yes.
I had 5 miscarriages and then a lot of years of being unable to conceive. I really reach out to women who have no children because that makes it harder. I think the infertility is just grinding and overwhelming for those women. Mm-hmm. But I had a pastor one time that said, we should never waste a hurt because other people need to hear about it. And it helps other women to know, oh, I've been through that. And it is hard. And it's interesting how God has pointed women toward me who didn't know I had those issues early on.
Speaking of hurts, when you're sharing with women, it's hard sometimes to tear that wall down, to get into their life because they think that other people don't really understand.
Yes.
So when you share about the miscarriages that you've had, that breaks that wall down because you have been transparent with them. Yes. So as you've ministered to these women, when you see the light come on in their eyes, what do you do? And how does that make you feel?
Well, I just feel like God's blessed me to be able to do that. And it's a very private grief oftentimes when you miscarry because maybe you haven't told anybody you're expecting, or, you've told a lot of people you're expecting. And then I think people don't understand the grief process with that. Mm-hmm. And if you're able to sit down with a woman and say, I understand why you don't want to talk about it. I understand why it's a very private grief. When the light comes on, and you feel like you've helped them, that's so rewarding.
I too had one, and I ran into someone who was not as kind. They said you should just get over it.
Yes, I had that a lot.
And usually from people who have not had children.
Right.
That's a very delicate time in that woman's life. And for you to be a testimony of, hey, this is what has happened to me. I'm going to walk with you through this. I'm going to tell you how I feel. And yes, we'll go through this together. That is a definite blessing to do that for someone. I'm just so grateful that you do.
Well, thank you. It's a blessing for me too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
I was going to talk a little bit about the way God provided for us and during those years of ministry.
Yes.
I give all the glory to God for his provision. But although I started out as a professional, I started out as an accountant. I ended my career as a CFO. So he blessed me all those years to have better jobs and blessed us financially because of that. I've worked with a lot of women over the years because I've had women work for me because of the positions I've had. And one of the things I've tried to do is teach those women the same lessons my mom taught me. And that is anything worth doing is worth doing well, even the smallest task. If someone gives you something to do you don't want to do in the workplace, do it anyway, and people will notice that. One of my mentors told me, he said, if you see a problem lying on a table and everybody else is walking by it, pick it up and solve it, and you'll be noticed. And he said, because nobody else was willing to take it on. And he said, keep doing it and keep doing it. And I thought that was the best advice. Early in my career, women had to work harder than men to prove themselves.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that's not the case anymore. I feel like it may be slightly the case, but it's not as bad as it was when I first joined the workforce. I'm also going to say that women can be catty and mean. Don't do that. Encourage each other. Be there for each other.
Yes.
God made us nurturers, He didn't make us to be critical.
This is true.
So help each other out, especially, I think I was thrilled when the first woman joined one of my departments, because I thought, oh, great, we're going to, and it was a great thing. But sometimes it's not a great thing if we're catty to each other. So.
But okay, now let's talk about that cattiness. The cattiness I see sometimes is a protective mechanism.
Yes.
And not so much that you're going to move farther than I am, but you'll see the insecurities that I have.
Yes.
I will be catty with you, so you'll stay away from me.
Yes. Mm-hmm. You're right. It's a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they're insecure, oftentimes very insecure in their work, or mm-hmm. feel like maybe I don't know this well enough.
Yes.
And I think it's amazing if you're willing to help somebody in the workforce.
Definitely.
If you see them struggling and you're willing to say, I'm going to take a minute and sit down with you. And I used to have the philosophy, I'm not going to ask you to do something I don't know how to do myself. So I would sit down and, I might learn how to do it before I hired the person. I did always try to, if I saw somebody struggling, sit down and help them through the task.
I want to go back to your Sunday school girls. How old were they?
Roughly? They were 14 and 15, freshmen, high school freshmen.
You had the great group.
I loved them.
The almost driving group.
Yes.
How did you connect with these young ladies? Before I do that, what is the relationship that you have with your sisters? And would you consider yourselves besties when you were younger, or did you just kind of connect? And where are you now in your relationships?
That's a great question. I had 4 sisters. One passed away in 2021. And we were best friends growing up, playmates, best friends, and soul sisters, really, in so many ways, and still are, the 4 of us that are left. Thank God for my sisters. I don't know what I'd do without them. And I know how it feels to lose one. So I know that our sibling, and it's so hard. It was a harder loss for me than losing my parents. And losing my parents was hard, but they were 90 and 93, and they had lived full lives. They were looking forward to heaven. And to lose a sister at 6, she was 68. She died during COVID. She died of COVID, actually. But they were best friends to me, and still are. We do things together. We take trips together. We went to Colorado last summer, went hiking, and we're going to the beach together in April, the 4 sisters. So we're very, very close. And my sisters are amazing. The sister that died suffered from mental illness. She was bipolar, but she was the sweetest encourager, even during the midst of that's a terrible illness. She was a wonderful person. She always had positive things to say and was such an encourager to her younger sister. She was the oldest. And then I have another sister named Louise, who's 2 years older than me, and she lost her husband at 54. But she uses that loss. If she knows a young widow, somebody that's just lost their husband, she'll get their telephone number. She'll call them. He's been gone 14 years, but she still does that when she knows of somebody that's had a loss. And I have a sister, Julia, who's younger, and she suffered through a really bad marriage, a bad divorce, and she is a wonderful school teacher and has been able to move on and be joyful. And I'm so proud of her for that. And then I have a youngest sister, Joy, she's the baby. She's just amazing too. She's a horsewoman, and she has her doctorate in women's ministry from Gordon Conwell. And she's also had other careers. She's a physical therapist too. So I have some strong, amazing women for sisters.
Very nice. That's wonderful. I didn't know your mom, but what you've shared about her, I can see in you.
Oh, thank you.
You have so many of the characteristics that you described about her. And I don't know, there's just something about you. You are such a gracious person. So whatever your mom was doing, it dripped on you a lot. You're a strong woman, but you don't act in a negatively strong way. And I think that is amazing. So thank you for being the person that you are. And I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. I feel the same.
Oh, thank you. All righty. We're talking about the young ladies in your group.
Our Sunday school class, yes.
And we're talking about ageless. you started that whole concept of the ageless connection back then. So how did those young ladies gravitate to you? How were you able to pour into their lives and show them just what it means to be a woman of faith, someone who truly loves the Lord, but is able to enjoy life at the same time, not a stuffy person? How did you give them life and encourage them?
I think just giving them your time is the biggest thing, being there. I mean, I taught them for 1 hour a week, but I would have activities with them. I laughed one night, our doorbell, and I was a much younger person. So, I connected with them in some ways because I was closer to their age. But I was probably, when I started doing it, I was in my late 20s teaching them. My doorbell rang our doorbell rang about 10 o'clock one night, and it was my whole Sunday school class had just stopped by. And we already had my husband and I already had on our pajamas, and they just came back and piled in bed with us.
Okay. All right.
We had a new baby and they wanted to see the baby. And, so it was that I just think they respond if you give them time and let them know you love them. I don't think it matters how old you are. I don't think it matters if if you're closer to their age or not. I think if they know you're interested in them and love them, nothing else matters.
Let's move on from there. Should age be a factor in connecting with other women? And why do we focus so much on age? What's the big deal?
I do not know why we focus so much on age. I think some of it is cultural, particularly in the U.S., because there's so much focus on beauty. And let's face it, a 20-year-old woman has prettier skin and has prettier hair and everything than a 66-year-old woman. So I think our culture presses us to focus on age and beauty more than we should. Mm-hmm. Some of the most beautiful women I know are the oldest women I know because their spirits are so beautiful. My mother was a gorgeous woman, but she never wore a bit of makeup. Her beauty just shone through. And so I do think culturally we have to push back on the outward beauty. And let's talk about inward beauty and what wisdom brings to you and years of living bring that make those gorgeous wrinkles and kept crow's feet around your eyes from smiling.
Speaking of that, I have a question. A lot of older women did not color their hair. They accepted where they were. It was okay. Do you believe that society has put that on women to just stay looking younger, whatever you need?
Oh, absolutely. There's pressure to stay looking younger than you are.
And you're right. It's the age thing is not the outside, because we're going to change. We change every day, but it's what's happening on the inside that matters. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing that. How have you invested in the lives of the women around you? What is it that you feel that you're leaving in these women's lives? Tell me.
I think, like I said about the girls, when I taught Sunday school, I think it's your time. I think if you invest your time into other people's lives, they know you care. And I think you try to reflect Christ's love in your dealing with other women. Somebody's checking me out at Lowe's, for example, and I try to find something about her, like, what a pretty necklace, or you look so pretty today, or you look like you're happy in your job. Isn't that a blessing? So I try to find something positive to say to strangers. But I think to invest in women in your lives, you just got to spend the time. And I'm impressed with the women in our Bible study group. Even if it's a text or an email, they all try to invest in each other's lives from afar, because we don't live in the same communities.
Right.
But in the women that are in my life and my community, I try to keep in touch with text. I try to make lunch dates with a lot of them. I have like women groups I meet with, and it's not necessarily connected to church. So I try to connect with different groups of women, and I'm so blessed because I have lots of friends because I have these different groups. Just giving the time and making the effort is what you do.
How would you define girlfriend?
I just think it's another woman that lives in your life, who's there for you. I honestly think that is why women oftentimes do better losing a spouse than a man does, because we connect on a deeper level with each other. We have that support system that a man doesn't have.
Yeah, it's hard for men,
Yeah.
it's something about I've got to be strong, but many women can just say whatever, and it's okay because they can just be transparent.
And I think that you mentioned something that is very important. Be transparent, and that you will win friends. If you're transparent about your faith, you're transparent about the fact that you care for them, and even your own personal struggles. I think that builds a deeper relationship.
It does. Because it says, I'm not a super person and I hurt just like you. We may not have the same hurts, but we do go through things and we do need each other to connect. There are a lot of hurting women who have the smile on their faces, and you see them and you'll say, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. The typical answer. But that's not the case. You see many of these women at church. How can we do better as women to reach into that person's life? And then how can we tear down the age wall and say, we're all women. We need to connect. How can we fix that problem?
Our church has started a Bible study with very young mothers, and they said, grandmothers in the church, please attend. We want you to have a connection with the young mothers in this church and be a mentor to them. Some of them don't have their mothers in town. I think that's a great idea. Like we just said, time. I think expressing interest in people. I think it's harder now because the younger generation oftentimes doesn't. They're very private. And so it's hard to tear down that wall that they have around themselves. It's a barrier trying to get close to that age group. But I mean, with God, anything is possible.
As we're reaching out to women, what is maybe one thing that we could physically do to maybe encourage them to, like, okay, maybe they do care about me. What is it that you think we might be able to do that starts tearing down the walls?
I've done this with miscarriages. I had a girl in our church, young girl in our church that was some years ago that I knew had suffered a couple of miscarriages. And I went and sat by her in church, grabbed her hand and said, I'm here for you. I know what you're going through. Call me if you need me. Here's my telephone number. So I think you just you reach out, you take the risk. And sometimes that's hard to do.
It is. I want to go back to your days as a CFO. The women that saw you, did they just see you as a CFO? I know there had to be some management skills there on your part, but were you able to break away from that and build connections with them where they saw you as a real person? I can connect with her.
I think that's hard to do when you're managing people sometimes because it's hard to cross the barrier. But I tried to do that. And I tried to let those ladies know that I was there for them. Oftentimes when you work with somebody, you know all about the crises in their lives. And so I didn't try to be that woman boss, that lady boss that everybody dreaded going to work and dealing with. I tried to be one that was compassionate. It was understanding when you had to stay home with a sick child. I knew I couldn't be a close friend because that's hard to do if you're trying to manage people, but I did try to be a friend as well and to mentor them.
It's obvious that God has taken you on a journey throughout your whole life. You have pieces of your grandmother, lots of pieces of your mom, and you're sprinkling all those things on other women. And I just see that in you as you're sharing about the different things that you've experienced. And I appreciate that about you. I appreciate the wisdom that you share, and you're not afraid to talk about the Lord. And that is your life. And you say you want more of that. And I can see it. It's really in there. And so that's just such a blessing. You have been so wonderful. I want you to define the word ageless for me.
That's a good question. I think somebody that doesn't think about age. I think it's a woman that just never thinks about it. I laugh and tell my friends, I feel like I'm 28 till I look in the mirror. I do think it's that you decide. And my mother was that way. You just decide every day is a gift, whether you're 66, my age, or you're 16, that every day is a gift that God's given us to live life to the fullest. That's one of my verses. I came to give you life that you might have an abundant life. So I think if you're going to have an abundant life, you need to live an ageless life.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Fearfully and wonderfully made we are. And he tells us to live vibrantly. And I love that. I love it. I have a fun question for you before we end. If you were a spice, which one would you be, and how would you use your spice to sprinkle on someone else's life?
Well, I'd probably be Ginger, because that was my name growing up with my family, my nickname. So Virginia, Ginger. So I'd probably be Ginger, and Ginger it helps you with digestion. So it soothes your digestion. So I hope I would be a soothing presence for others.
Okay.
But it does add a little spice, and I can be a little spicy too.
I don't think I've seen that part.
Just ask my husband.
Okay. So you would be Ginger, spicing up people.
Yes. And being a soothing presence, hopefully sometimes.
Virginia, I am just so thankful for the time that we've had to share and to laugh and to hear your heart, to hear you speak the words that you've shared, because they're going to impact someone's life. I know they have mine. And to hear all of the wonderful things in your life, your grandmother, your mom, how they instilled those things in you. It is so important for us as women to live in a way that will be a positive in the lives of the ladies around us. If we're believers, that is a definite command. We are supposed to live as Christ would have us live. And you do that.
Amen.
You do that so well. Well, Virginia, I'm so grateful for the time that you've given to us and to allow the ladies to share your walk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Hey, my friend. Thanks for joining me today on Ageless and for being an amazing part of this journey. Don't forget, you have been fearfully and wonderfully made. Go out today and live this life vibrantly. Until next time, bye for now.